Just look at these! Aren't they stunning? These oyster shell ornaments are decorated with a beautiful 12 Days of Christmas design, and they make the perfect keepsake or gift for the holiday season. In today's video, I'm going to show you exactly how to make them from start to finish. Everything from prepping your napkin to adding those little finishing touches that really make them shine. To make these beautiful oyster shell ornaments, we'll start with a napkin featuring the 12 Days of Christmas design. I managed to find two different designs. This one I purchased on Amazon and this one on Etsy. Now I'll be honest, these are a bit of a treasure hunt to track down. They can be hard to find, and when you do, they are often sold in small quantities for a pretty steep price. If you spot them, I recommend grabbing a few extra because they might not be available next year. I actually got these from a lovely shop called Transfer Treasure by Me. Shipping was super fast, and the seller even tucked in a sweet handwritten thank you note along with a little surprise gift. She has also graciously offered a special discount just for my viewers. So if you are looking for some unique and beautiful napkins to decoupage with, be sure to check out her shop. You'll find all the discount details and the link in the description box below. Now we are going to start by prepping our napkin and cutting out the designs we want to use. I like to cut out each design first and then separate the layers afterward. I find it much easier this way. If you separate the layers first, the napkin becomes very delicate and flimsy, which can make it tricky to cut cleanly. Here is a little tip for you. When you are shopping for napkins, pay close attention to the size. The ones I'm using today are cocktail napkins, which are smaller than the standard dinner size. That works perfectly for me because my oyster shells are on a smaller side. So choose your napkin size based on the shells you want to decorate. Now it's time to separate the layers of the napkin. When we decoupage, we only use the very top layer with the printed design. Most napkins have 3 layers, but sometimes you'll come across ones with just 2. See these tiny designs? Don't throw away those scraps. Cut them out too. We can layer these small pieces onto the shell to fill in empty spaces or add extra detail. It really helps tie the whole look together and makes the overall design more interesting. I've cut out all the pieces, including a few of those tiny holly accents that really complement the theme. Now what I'm going to do is sort through my collection of shells and find the perfect size shell for each cutout. Since some pieces are bigger and others smaller, I want to make sure each one fits nicely on the shell. Before we paint the inside of the shells, I like to drill the holes first. It's easier to do this step now, so you don't risk cracking the shell after it's painted. Plus, drilling beforehand helps keep the paint finish nice and smooth without any accidental damage. So I've gathered all my cutouts and set them aside for now. We won't be using them for a little while. To drill the hole, I'm using a scrap piece of wood to protect my work surface, a mask for my safety, and of course my drill. Just place your shell right on the scrap piece of wood and start drilling. It's really that simple. And look at that! One perfect little hole. See how easy that was? Now we are ready to move on to painting. To paint the inside of the shells, I am using this white chalk paint, but honestly, any acrylic paint will work just fine. I usually apply 2 coats to get a nice, even finish that really pops. Just be sure to let each coat dry completely before adding the next one. Otherwise, you might accidentally wipe off the first coat while you are painting the second. Patience really pays off here. Now that the shells are painted, the fun part begins. I am using Mod Podge with a glossy finish for this. Start by applying a thin, even layer of Mod Podge onto the shell. Then gently place your napkin on top, making sure it's nice and straight. Once it's in place, press it down softly to help it adhere. There are lots of ways to apply the napkin, and everyone has their own favorite technique. I like to add the top coat right away, smoothing out any wrinkles as I go. Just a heads up, if you use too much Mod Podge, the napkin can tear, but if you use too little, your finger might stick and cause tearing as well. So it's a bit of a balancing act. Try different methods and find what works best for you. Continue this process until you've decoupaged all 12 shells. Take your time with each one so every design looks neat and smooth. Trust me, it's worth the extra care. Remember those tiny holly accents we cut out earlier? Now it's the time to use them. Just glue them onto any empty spots on your shells, choosing places that feel balanced and visually pleasing to you. These little touches really help pull the whole design together. I like to add a second layer of Mod Podge to each shell for a little extra protection. It helps seal the design and makes your ornaments more durable, especially if you plan to store them and use them year after year. If you are looking at them right now and thinking they seem a little plain, you are right. But don't worry, we are about to jazz them up with a touch of gold paint around the edges. That little shimmer really takes them from pretty to stunning. To paint the edges, I am using this metallic gold paint from Folk Art. You could also use metallic markers if you prefer, but I stick with the paint because I do a lot of decoupage and it's much more cost-effective in the long run. Plus it gives a nice rich finish that really elevates the look. I like to start by applying the first layer of gold paint along the front edge of the shell. I am using a smaller brush here because I prefer a slimmer border, but that's totally a personal preference. I also find it much easier to work with an angled paintbrush as it gives me more control and helps keep the edges neat. Once the first layer is dry, I flip the shell over and paint just the trim along the back. This way, the ornament looks finished from every angle, without the paint creeping too far in and looking sloppy. I hope you are enjoying this video and maybe even feel inspired to try making these yourself. They are so much fun and honestly a little addictive. Once you make one, you might find yourself eyeing every oyster shell you see and thinking, ornament potential. If you like this tutorial, don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more crafty projects like this. Once the back is painted, I flip the ornament over and apply the second layer of gold paint to the front. I usually do this right after finishing the first layer on the back, but if this is your first time, I'd suggest letting the back dry completely first. That way, you avoid accidentally smudging the paint while you work. Now it's time for the finishing touches. I'm adding a red and white baker's twine and a gold bead to each ornament. The red really pops against the gold trim and gives the ornament a festive Christmas feel. Adding the bead wasn't the easiest task, but I've got a little trick for you. First, cut a piece of twine and thread it through the hole in your oyster shell. Next, we'll add the bead, but since the ends of the twine are frayed and the bead's hole is pretty small, I use a bit of packing tape to wrap the ends of the twine. This makes it much easier to slide the twine through the tiny bead opening. Next, snip off the tape and tie a small knot right above the bead to hold it in place. Lastly, tie the ends of the twine together, and just like that, your ornament is ready to hang on the Christmas tree. I hope you had fun, and until next time, happy crafting!